Good afternoon. Welcome to Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. My name is Brent. I'm your host, and we're waiting for my special guest, Mike Maurice from Kitchener, Ontario, who will be joining us this afternoon and giving us an overview of everything that's going on in HUMA. So just wait momentarily while Mike joins in. Mike Maurice has joined the show, everyone. Mike, thank you so much for coming on to the Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies show. It's always a great pleasure having Mike Maurice from Kitchener, Ontario, joining us. And thank you, Mike, for coming on.
Brent, so good to hear your voice again. Nice to be with you all. Kudos for all the advocacy you've been doing and on the community you've been building up. The timing of this call is just perfect. So I'm thrilled to be back and hope to answer some questions you all might have. Thanks again for hosting this space, Brent. It's really good to be back again.
Yeah, it's always a great pleasure having you on, and I always look forward to having you on the segments. And people always cheer out, "When's Mike coming back on? When's Brent? When's Mike coming on?" I said, "I'll reach out to his secretary and I'll arrange it accordingly." And so it's like they're always like, "When's Mike coming on?" So it's a great pleasure, Mike. And yeah, we were having a few discussions just as you were logging on, and I stressed the point that anyone who has questions for you, like when we take the questions from the floor, to definitely just line them up, and we'll try and get them all answered the best way we can and in a timely manner. So first of all, I'll start it off where Mike, on ongoing advocacy, it never takes a break. It's a tireless work, and I always greatly appreciate everything that you do, standing up in the House and speaking about lived experience. I mean, and pressing the point of why it's so urgent to get this bill C-22 passed. I mean, and properly passed, right? I mean, make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and in getting getting an emergency benefit. I guess that's the part that when you were logging on, you might have heard us kind of discussing about an emergency benefit. And I just want to maybe get an overview of where things are at for people that are listening in on the call today of HUMA and the committee stage, where you see things are at, or where things are at, and do you see an emergency benefit fitting in there, either federally or maybe through provincial counterparts?
Yeah, great question. So let's start in terms of where the committee work is at. The committee will be meeting again on Monday. That just got posted today. And I think it's 3:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon. And then that's where we're going to continue the clause-by-clause review of the bill, where committee members and myself will have a chance to continue to introduce their suggested amendments and improvements for the committee's consideration. We got 2 more hours on Monday. I'm optimistic we might be able to get through the whole group of amendments. Officially, the amendment package itself is confidential, so I'm not permitted to share what other amendments are coming from other MPs. I think I'm allowed to share about my own, so I can share more about those if there are questions. But we have that one more committee meeting, and then HUMA typically also meets on Wednesdays. So I would expect, if there is need for it, there would be a third chance for amendments on Wednesday of next week. So that's the update on where we're at with the committee, and I can share for those that are curious a bit more about what happened on Wednesday, or if there's questions about the first committee meeting. Those amendments are all now on the public record, so we can talk about those as much as you all would like. On the question about a disability emergency response benefit, this has been really disappointing. I brought it up on the floor of the House again as recently as yesterday morning to a Liberal MP, and there is very, very little interest from other parliamentarians. It's deeply frustrating. We all know that Parliament knows how to do an emergency response benefit. They did it through the pandemic. It, to me, reminds all the advocacy that we need to continue to do, that obviously MPs need to be hearing more from Canadians with disabilities and their allies to be calling out for an emergency response benefit. Parliament could do it. there is, in my view, insufficient political will across our parliament right now for it. And when I ask about it, I usually get something to do with either I don't know what that is or we're doing C22, without recognizing that C22 is a substantial way away still. And we can talk more about timelines, and I have an amendment on that. But in the interim, I keep saying people with disabilities are not seeing any benefit today or tomorrow as a result of the discussion on C22. And enough parliamentarians need to understand that and take action on it. And we're far from there. Which is disappointing to share, but I always want to be candid with you all with the realities of where I see hope and where there is reason for deep frustration.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mike, on that for the update, and definitely there's pertinent, obviously, information that can't be talked about right now, and totally understandable on that because like it's there's definitely lots that can be talked about and on what you covered, and that's awesome because then we can dive into the stuff that can be talked about. And once the other stuff's all ironed out, then definitely will be more discussions on that stuff after. And that stuff we can have you on once all that stuff's passed through, and future shows definitely for sure as we move forward. And so I invite everybody who would love to ask Mike some questions. Definitely put up your hands, and I will actually get Patricia and Joanne, either or, to direct questions to Mike.
Go ahead, Cassandra.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Mike. So lovely to have you here. Yeah, I would like to know. I didn't get to watch the last hearing in entirety. I only got bits and pieces of it, but I'm definitely interested in the areas where you see hope. If you could expand upon those, that would be really great.
Well, I guess the biggest point of enthusiasm for me is that it seems like all parties continue to support the bill. And that's pretty rare, particularly one that is going to require significant government spending. Usually, things like the carbon tax, for example, are so divisive, and often I feel like MPs get lost in putting their parties ahead of the issue. In this case, there seems to be widespread agreement across all parties to move forward with the disability benefit as quickly as possible. And that is, to me, really hopeful. It's part of what reminds me that our parliament is able to do really meaningful work when enough advocates have made it clear the importance of that work. And I really credit it's the disability community that put pressure on the governing party to put this in their platform, on other MPs to put the pressure to then push them to introduce the bill. Like, we are only here because of many of the people I see who are listening in right now. Organizations like Disability Without Poverty and March of Dimes and Inclusion Canada that have been pushing for us to get to this point. To me, there's a lot of hope we should have in the fact that we know MPs are all supporting. Like, there's no question C22 is going to pass. The only question is to what extent can we strengthen the bill? How quickly will it pass? And then how strong will the regulations be, as well as we need to continue to put pressure on the governing party to fund the benefit. We need to both get the legislation and the funding for it. So the shorter answer to the question is I'm optimistic that C22 is going to get passed. But then also we learned on Wednesday that they're open to improvements. So the fact that we already have 5 amendments have passed. 4 of them are ones that I proposed. That 3 of the 4 were supported by all parties. One of them, the governing party was opposed to, but others were supportive of, and so it also passed. So we also now know that there is legitimate interest in reasonable improvements to the bill. So that's where, for example, requiring that it'll be indexed to inflation passed. Yes, on the positive side, so I'll pause there. Those are the positives from my point of view, is that there is support for it to go ahead, and there's at least openness to very reasonable improvements. Not
Okay,
sufficient. I'd love to see them take on more improvements, and we can talk about some, I'm disappointed, for example, working age. They're not willing to have that taken out of the bill, but those are the positives at least.
okay, so I have one follow-up on that, and that is I didn't catch the whole thing, but I think there was something, a motion for an amendment on amount not being below the poverty line. And one of the things that we've continuously put pressure on is the fact that it costs more to live with a disability. And that's even if we had all our proper supports, there's still things that cannot be provided through targeted supports that increase our cost of living compared to an able-bodied individual. And so has there been any movement on that and making sure, like in the adequacy part, that it's truly reflective of not the cost of living for a person without disabilities, but the cost of living for a person with disabilities?
Yeah, so great question. The answer, it was a mixed bag. On the disappointing side, both MP Benita Zarrillo and myself attempted to introduce an amendment that would have required for the disability benefit to be at or above the official poverty line. It would have changed Section 5 of the bill. Unfortunately, that amendment was ruled inadmissible, which is House of Commons jargon for bigger than what the bill was intended to do, and MPs at committee are not permitted to increase the scope of the bill. It's the governing party, and this is how our democracy works. The governing party got the most seats, they get to set the agenda, and MPs like ourselves can then try to strengthen the existing agenda, but it was ruled that that amendment is larger than the scope of the bill, and so it was inadmissible. In light of that, MP Zarrillo then introduced a different amendment that was admissible, that at least adds to the section of the bill that talks about regulations, saying that they need to at least consider the official poverty line when making the regulations. That got through. So there's going to be a new text of the bill that's going to require them to consider the official poverty line, but it doesn't require that they get above it. So for all of us who were trying to push on increasing and getting more clarity on the actual amount in the bill, we're not going to get that. But thanks to MP Zarrillo, we're at least going to have a requirement that they consider the official poverty line. For many of you and for myself, that's not good enough, but unfortunately that's as much as we're going to be able to get on that front. And it's partly why we're going to need to continue to advocate on funding the benefit and on making sure it's an adequate amount, on making sure that you are all consulted, that Canadians with disabilities are consulted, so that when they build the regulations, it's your voices that should be heard to continue to push them on the actual amount.
Mm-hmm. Thanks on that, Mike. And before we go to the next hand up, I'm just going to quickly just jump in there. I know that there's been a lot of discussion on basically people that are on provincial pensions, right? Disability pensions, that would they automatically, and I guess it might be one of the kind of the parts that they're working on. I'm not sure, but there's been a lot of discussion that we've been having. And people on provincial, will they automatically be put on to that as an extension, or I guess is that kind of something that I guess still in the works, or do they have to apply for that separately?
So that's two-part question. The question about eligibility is going to be in the regulation, so we're not going to have the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
However, the part about accessibility, that's another amendment that I did put forward and did get approved. So there's new text in the bill that now says that the disability benefit must be barrier-free in terms of how to access it. And I gave the example at committee of that when someone files their taxes, they are automatically considered for the disability benefit as opposed to a separate application process.
Perfect.
That amendment passed. That's again what I heard from so many, folks like yourself. That's us doing the work, and that's what inspires me, that it's possible to get improvements to the bill at committee, and we got that one done. So that was a real highlight.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's wonderful news, because I mean, so many times I'd have other open mic, or I'd have another show, like I'd have say Benita Zarello on, or Kim Pate, doesn't matter who I had on, and that was always a discussion that we'd always have on, going, well, is it going to be an accessibility issue of separate application? And that's so thrilling to know that part. Wow, that's awesome. Like, congratulations on your strong advocacy on getting that pushed forward too. I'm going to reach over to, she'll go to Patricia first, and then Greg, and then Patricia and Joanne, you can actually direct other hands up.
Thanks, Brent. And Mike, it's wonderful to have you back. Okay, my question is in a couple of parts. And one of the things that I really, really dislike is the concept of the poverty line. Now, I know this is a lot of talk, and I know that it comes up a lot in the House, and I know that it's been a huge part of HUMA. And so I would like to get anyone on the record as to what that number is, because I have studied the market basket measure a lot. It's something that I pay a lot of attention to, and so I would like just one person to name that number. So if you've got it, I'd really like to have it.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Patricia, and thanks for your advocacy online too. I see you, and appreciate you and others for all that you've been pushing for. I think it really adds up. So the official poverty line, StatsCan, I believe, publishes the amount province by province with some regularity. So it's not a matter of opinion or somebody going on the record. It's actually just a matter of finding the StatsCan number. And so as we're speaking, that's what I'm in the midst of doing, is seeing if I can pull up the number for you. You might already have it. It sounds like you're more of an expert on this than most. So you might have that number. Not pull it up.
No, I mean, it's a regional thing. It goes rurally. It goes by population. I mean, the number is like, there are numbers, and they're flexible, and they're tethered to the cost of living. The market basket measure is not just one thing. However, you listen to Benita Zarello, for example, sitting in HUMA, and she says there is the official poverty line, and like Canada has an official federal poverty line. I would like to know specifically what that number is, so that we can finally decide amongst us what that magic number is. Like, when we think poverty line, the truth is we don't really think of a number. We think of a brand of person, and that brand of person is among us. We don't think to a tethered number, and we certainly know, as Cassandra mentioned, that persons with disabilities have much higher expenses. More importantly, when you're living from one place to another place, the truth is your expenses are higher from one area of Canada to another area of Canada. As you well know, Kitchener, for example, has got a higher cost of living than, say, for example,
Right.
I don't know, someplace like, for example, perhaps St. John. Or, Vancouver and Toronto, they have much higher costs than, say, Peterborough. And so we don't, when just an average middle-class person is sitting around thinking about the poverty line, they're not thinking about that number. And so they don't care. They're thinking about what it means to just be poor. And so, fine, Canada has an official poverty line. I would like to know what that number is specifically, because then we have some place to jump from. That way, provinces can start to work together. People can start to have a real quality of life. And we can start manifesting human comforts, as well as just being able to scrape by. It's something that we're all in here working on. It's not just the fact that we need to pay rent and be able to afford food, which is out of this world, which, according to a document, a report released, is only going to get higher in 2023. So these are real concerns. This is what matters right now. What does it sit at? What's that number?
Yeah, all great questions, Patricia. The official poverty line was calculated in Canada's official poverty reduction strategy, which I think came out just fairly recently. In that document, it then gives examples. So, in Winnipeg, for a couple, it's $36,544. That's kind of the exact number you're looking for. But it then splits it out right across the country based on, I think, both individual and family income. And so I would refer you to there. I think the only caveat I want to offer is that this is a floor. And I think as you mentioned, people with disabilities have additional expenses that other Canadians don't have. And so I think it's also important that we don't limit ourselves, that we need to be pushing for more while recognizing, as you're saying, that the cost of living is different. In urban, often it's a higher cost of living than rural, for example. And so we need to be pushing for more. But if you're looking for that official answer, if you go to the poverty reduction strategy, you should see in there the numbers right across the country.
Okay. So the official poverty line federally is not just one thing. And so that's
No,
something that we need to make clear. Okay, good. So it's not just an official poverty line. And so people can alleviate themselves from that notion. That's what we're gunning for.
yes,
Correct?
here's the definition. A
Okay.
household is considered to be in poverty if it does not have enough money to buy a specific basket of goods and services that allow it to meet its basic needs and achieve a modest standard of living in its community. They've baked into that definition that it's different depending on what community you live in. What they will also do that might be misleading for some is they give an average. So the average official poverty line for a family of two with two kids is 37,542. But that's not the line itself. That's just the average of the different communities right across the country.
Okay. All right, good. So when we're talking about benefits and we're talking about being able to manifest any quality of life whatsoever, we should stop talking about maybe getting them up to sort of $20,000 or
Yeah,
$22,000 a year, especially if there are persons with disabilities, because we already know that they have higher expenses. Because every time we see a benefit and it goes as high as $17,000 a year, we already know that that's not livable.
I would 100% agree with you. And if anything, this is why we need to make sure that your voices are at the table in creating the regulations, is to ensure that that continues to come through. And I think Minister Qualter would say the same thing, that we need to make sure that your voice is there so that they understand that when they talk about the actual amounts. I'm going to continue to push her on various aspects of the bill, but you're exactly getting at what we need to be hearing, which is that amount is going to be different in different parts of the country.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I was very disappointed with Tracy Gray when she disallowed you from being completely and totally involved in the process itself. Now, I realize that one of the things which is extremely disappointing is, like, in terms of us, like, I understand that there are things that, like, in terms of like the parliamentarian process, that we are not able to like not able to really know or whatever. But I have to say, speaking as a person with a disability, with multiple disabilities, that there's this lack of transparency is extremely creates a sense of dubiousness, which is disheartening in a big way. We know that you can talk about your policies and your thoughts and the whole thing, but the fact that there are holdbacks is extremely disheartening. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you understand what?
I hear what you're saying. My understanding of why so specifically what I can't share with you is I can't share with you how many amendments there are and who has proposed what. And I think the reason for that is that the MP who is bringing forward that amendment wants to be the first one to talk about it so that other MPs don't slander amendments before they've even been raised. And so I think it's just trying to give each MP the chance to make the case for their amendment at the committee. Anything else is, I can share with you. I believe in building trust, and I think that means you might have seen my amendment about requiring the documents to be made public once there are agreements. I think we want to see governments sharing as much information as possible to build trust with Canadians. And in this case, this is why I think there's this rule about not sharing amendments beforehand, just to give that MP the chance to make their case. And it shouldn't be me telling you what MP Zerillo or MP Gray or anybody else. I was disappointed that the committee didn't give me the ability to, I don't even have access to the briefs until they're publicly posted on the website. That's a decision that the committee made, and I have to live with that.
I will happily send you mine.
Hello, how are you today?
Hey again, Greg. Good to hear your voice.
What figure did you say for the poverty level for Winnipeg, Manitoba was?
I will just pull it back up again here. You have to give me a second. And it was a couple, I think, that was cited in the report. Give me if you got a second question, feel free to go for your second question.
Because the working age, and I'm kind of saddened that the working age was not deleted, because this is where I will say that once this bill is royal assented, and I could basically go into my snow globe Goldie crystal ball here, which I have in front of me here. Once that bill is royal assented, I could guarantee you there's going to be disabled seniors or senior citizen advocates are going to basically launch a charter challenge on the particular bill, because that is a violation of equality rights, Section 2, and maybe treading dangerous waters on Section 7 and Section 15 of the charter.
Yeah, listen, Greg, I share your disappointment. We know it's 10% of Canadians with disabilities over the age of 65 that are living in poverty, and they won't be covered in whatever comes out of this process. And so, if anything, I'll just reinforce with you, this is why elections matter. The governing party gets to set the agenda, and the governing party made a commitment specific to a benefit for so-called working age Canadians with disabilities. And outside of a charter challenge, as you've suggested, it's now clear that other parliamentarians like myself will not be permitted to push them to expand the scope, nor have we advocated sufficiently enough to put enough pressure on them to do so. That means that ultimately, again, I respect our democracy, and this was a democratically elected governing party, but I'm deeply disappointed that they don't understand that over the age of 65, it's not like a disability goes away, and neither does poverty. And it's just deeply disappointing. And so I hope that we're going to push in other ways to improve the bill, and push all elected MPs to see the error of their ways on this. And ultimately, it's in future elections that we could seek to elect a government that's going to expand whatever disability benefit we come up with here. If I can just make really clear again, advocacy that you've all done and the ways that you've come together, even just in calls like this is our democracy at its best. The people who will be affected by the legislation telling people like me what they expect. That's how this is supposed to work. And as I've said many times before, I'm doing this because neighbors of mine told me time and time again what life on ODSP in Ontario is like. And we need to end legislated poverty as a result.
Joseph has his hand up. I know that what Joseph's going to talk to you already about, Mike, because he had messaged me, and he has a few numbers here.
Yeah, let's go for that, and let's do a final round of Patricia question too, because I am a bit behind, but we can do a final couple questions here.
Yeah. Okay, so what we'll do is, Joseph, I'll take your quick your numbers, and then I will reach over to Patricia, and then we'll just do a conclusion. And Mike, I would like to get you on. When are you? Maybe were we looking at maybe before the end of this year? I should have you on, just a kind of quick follow up, or would beginning of January sometime, just so I can
Yeah,
figure that out.
I think it'll need to be January at some point.
Okay.
But I would love to do it. In fact, I don't have to be in Parliament for all of January, so it's easier to find some time over the course of the month.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You and I can just send you a message, and then
Great.
and if you don't need to go through to have the secretary schedule in, I mean, you and I you can just come on or wherever. You and I can correspond and figure out a good time for sure.
Hello, Mike. Can you hear me?
I can. Yep.
Hi, Mike. Joseph here. As always, pleasure to talk to you. As you know, I'm the numbers guy of the group. And according to the Maytree Welfare Incomes Report for 2021, the low income measure, if you have a pen and paper handy, is now 27,461. That is the Canada poverty line nationally. $27,461 for an individual.
Perfect. If you've got a report you can share on like a DM on Twitter, Joseph, sounds like Brent and the group would love to see it, as would I. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Joseph, on that. Definitely. I'm going to push the mic over to Patricia, and then Mike, you and I will do a final conclusion. And then any other people who have questions for Mike, what I'm going to do is please direct message me your questions. And when I have you on, I'll have a whole compile of probably questions. I'll be like, here you go, Mike. Here, boom, boom, boom.
Love it.
Yeah. So I encourage everyone to, just any concerns or questions, just send me a direct message, and then I'll send them over to Mike. While I'll read them out to him. Unless all of you are on that segment, then we'll take that turns. But yeah, if you're not able to make it on, just send the message over. Thank you so much. So Patricia, over to you.
Thanks, and I promise to try and keep it brief. Disability is it's a nuanced thing, and so is domestic violence, and so is all of the things, and the issues that we face here in this group is, we have open mics, which you may or may not know, and when we do, we come together in a quiet way, and we talk about these things and our feelings. And Brent he's just a miracle man with how he's been able to create this space for us. And so you come in here and we seem a little defensive, or we seem a little, agitated and whatever. And of course it's not about you. It's about just how scared we all are. We're just so scared. And Minister Cointreau comes onto the television. She talks about how, it's almost 1 in 4 Canadians who are disabled now, but back in 2017, the statistic was 1 in 5, and those are the last published statistics. So, they're going in the wrong direction, and that means that anybody can become disabled and at any time. And we have caregivers here in this very room who are disabled, but they're also caregivers of other disabled people, whether it's their children or their parents or just other people. And so, it's what I said before, it's nuanced. And so to have a discussion about and places where you can go, which are, supposed to be other safe spaces when you are a victim of domestic violence, is not necessarily a safe space, because these are places which are filled with bed bugs, which are filled with where you're not actually safe, because where your abuser is able to find you, and they're abusive places themselves. And so these are very, very difficult conversations to have when you are, and you're our best advocate in the House. That's the truth. The truth is that you are our best advocate. Whether or not you represent Kitchener, we are your constituents. This is it. This is who you represent, because you're always talking about us. You're always talking about the disabled. And so we rely on your voice. Be that as it may, this is not a safe bill for us. No matter what the numbers are, no matter how happy, Minister Quantrill is about it, no matter what happens, this is not a safe bill. And a lot of us have lost faith in it entirely. And so we're talking about DERB, and DERB isn't even really a thing. And so, we're all of us terrified. We're coming from provinces that don't even have a safety net. We live in provinces which have the worst safety net. We're talking about friends of ours who are in very compromised positions. You're standing there at your phone talking about, well, you should be doing this and doing that. Of course you don't have answers to these issues because you couldn't possibly. But you are sitting before a government that absolutely has control. This bill is not safe. No matter what the poverty line is, no matter what the numbers are, no matter where it goes, we need some kind of social safety net, and it is not being provided to us here. And that is, I think, one of the most terrifying things. And not only that, but it's worse for people who are part of the Indigenous community. It's worse for people who are part of the LGBTQ2SPIA plus community. It gets worse and worse, whether or not you are in an urbanized area or whether or not you are in a rural area. This bill does not cover the basics. And oh my God, if you're a senior, we already know they don't want to cover you. Mm-hmm. And we haven't even talked about MAID. I mean, that hasn't even come up. And everybody in this room here knows somebody who is up for MAID really super soon. So these are very important conversations. And we're extremely grateful to you for subjecting yourselves to us. But this is why we're scared. And this is why we're defensive. And this is why we're all like, oh, we're not trying to attack you, so on and so forth. But we're at our laptops and we're at our computers and we're at our devices and we're looking these things up all the time because we're just so petrified. And we're always on the defensive. And the advocacy isn't about just us. The advocacy is looking at us as though we're patient zero and what else is going to happen to the next person, because we're listening to each other talk and we know that we don't have the right way to tell you and the rest of our MPs who, by the way, shut us out, or worse, block us on Twitter. They block us.
Yeah, which is very.
Oh my God, they block us.
Yeah.
So how are we supposed to solve this problem if they won't even respond? Worse, if they block us.
Ooh, ouch. I'm so sorry, Patricia.
Well, I mean, not mine, but I think about how many people we have in this group who have shown us snapshots of their MPs or of other MPs who have been blocked.
I just want to start by saying, Patricia, I really also just appreciate your candor and your anger, because you've all found ways to translate that frustration and that anger into political advocacy that is shaping this work. And Patricia, you're right. It's not going to be enough, but it will only happen at all because of all of your advocacy. In fact, it's a big reason of why I ran to be an MP in the first place, is because I was angry about some of these deep inequalities as well. And I felt like there's no point in doing anything else besides trying to change the federal law. And you are all in the midst of changing federal laws right now, too. And so you don't need to apologize to me. In fact, it's a huge honor for you to say some of what you said. You all can choose to vote however you'd like. But for my part, while I might be directly accountable to folks in Kitchener, I am appreciative of getting to hear insights from all of you right across the country and to seek to be a good voice for people with disabilities across the country. Because I know that by doing that, that's how I best honor my neighbors in Kitchener and do the work that I was sent to do. And I'm going to continue to do it. And I think the more that you are all willing, and I know it's some of these, listening to some of these sessions must be very traumatic as you feel and see the disconnect between some MPs and the reality of each of your lived experiences. And that must be like, I can only imagine how shitty that must feel. So the fact that you even put up with that says a lot. But not only do you put up with it, but then you put your energies towards advocating in constructive ways to make sure your voices are still all heard, while also in the same breath sharing, that I agree, Patricia. We know this is not going to be everything we want it to be, and as I said earlier, that's why elections matter. You're right. There are limitations to what an MP like myself can do at committee. The governing party has the power to choose which bills to introduce, and right now that is the Liberal Party. And for those of us who would like to see something different, well, it's on all of us to advocate for that when it comes around to election time. In the meantime, it's on all of us to do the best we can with the parliament that we have. And that's what I feel kind of lucky for all of you, because I feel you've all fired me up this afternoon for going back into committee on Monday for pushing for the next set of amendments that you're going to see come forward on Monday. We're not done yet in terms of making improvements to this bill, and we haven't even started the regulatory process where, if we have it our way, we're going to make sure that Canadians with disabilities are meaningfully involved, and we're going to then make sure that we continue to bring this advocacy to fruition through the regulatory process. A long-winded way of saying I really appreciate you all. I think Twitter spaces like this are the best of our democracy, that people like me should be hearing from each of you every day. This is how a democracy is supposed to work. Based on what I hear, I then go, the reason I'm advocating for an emergency response benefit for people with disabilities is because many of you shared with me that that's what matters to you. And in fact, on the call tonight, we have at least one person from Kitchener that I see with us who has told me the exact same thing. And so this is how our democracy works, but it does take all of us. If I showed it was just me and Brent, it'd be, Brent, we'd have a good chat, but it wouldn't be anything like what we just had the last hour and 40 minutes.
Exactly.
So thanks to all of you for all that you're putting in.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Mike, for your strong advocacy and pushing forward. I know it's a lot, right? Listening to a lot of the impact statements from a lot of the people who have submitted their testimonies in during HUMA, and there's a lot more to do. There's definitely a lot more to do, and collectively as this group and across the country, more of us come together advocating stronger and pushing for change, and that's what it's about, Mike, is pushing for change to make things better for everybody. I agree, and I just want to wish you a really, I call it a green Christmas, but but a Merry Christmas to you from all of us, on behalf of all of us from Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. I want to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas, and I thank you for everything that you are doing, and carry our voices forward on Monday to HUMA, and let them know that we're scared. Like, we are scared, and kind of like I'm echoing what Patricia's saying too, right? And all of us, we are.
Thanks for that, Brent. And again, to all of you, one promise I can make is that it'll be this conversation that I'll be thinking of when I'm at HUMA on Monday.
Yeah.
And not just the words, but the emotion and the tone. Because I think it's on all of us. Every MP in that room should be centering themselves on your advocacy and your experiences, and that's what gives me any sense of hope that we can get some more improvements passed. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday also. Can't say enough about the power of your advocacy, and I'll be thinking of you throughout the session on Monday for sure.
Sounds wonderful, Mike. Thanks, and I will I'll get you on anytime after January the 9th.
Perfect. All right, Brent. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
We'll be in touch. Thanks. Take care, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, Mike.
You too. Merry Christmas to you all. Happy holidays to you all. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Kwanzaa.
Merry Christmas, Mike.
Here, we'll see you again.
We'll see you next year.
Happy holidays, Mike.
Take care. Happy holidays.
Yeah, you too. Happy holidays.